most of the rest of the time, which is work, 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 work. Happy International Day of Disabled People. Today I want to talk about something that impacts most, if not all, disabled people at some point in their life. This could be a smaller impact, a bigger impact. This could be short-term, long-term, intermittently, so it starts and stops. But it impacts almost the entire disability community. What am I talking about? I am talking about internalized ableism. Ableism is a set of beliefs that postulates, that claims that certain configurations, certain ways the body and the mind are made up are better than others. And thus it's a form of discrimination based on differences of bodies and minds from that standard norm body and mind. Internalized ableism is then when people who are discriminated against because of their body and mind differences take on those beliefs and internalize them, make them their own. This can be very hard and can lead to a lot of challenges for disabled people. This is the reason why some people, for instance, don't use assistive technology, because they believe they should be able to prove that they can do without. This is why it takes people so long to take on the term disabled as an identity marker, as something that describes them. They rather use other words. This is why many people who can hide their disability don't talk about it. And I have a whole video here where I talk about invisible disabilities. So check that out if you like. I see internalized ableism also my data, no matter in which context I am. If these are people affected by leprosy in the Philippines who face the stigmatization and take on the stigmatization that comes with the physical deformity that leprosy can lead to. People are not willing to leave their house because they're worried about the stairs, and they start considering themselves as worthless. Just listen to one of our participants.
I really lost hope because nobody even dared to go near me. My wife and I do not sleep anymore in the same bed. We do not even talk to each other the way we used to. I do not want to look at myself anymore in the mirror.
Oh, just in case you were wondering, of course, these aren't PLB's real voices. These are AI generated avatars, and the voices are AI generated as well. But the quotes come from real people. I just have to protect their identity as part of the research project that I did and as part of the research ethics and research process behind it. I similarly see challenges with internalized ableism in the UK. When I did a 2-year study of people's experience of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a lot of internalized ableism there as well. People feeling that they shouldn't ask for more help because other people would consider them a burden, worthless, incapable, even though they needed it. They needed the additional help, they needed the assistive technology, they needed something. They didn't ask for it. Internalized ableism is also the reason why I've seen participants continue in jobs that are not good for their bodies or their minds, but they do it because they feel that's what they need to do. They feel that this is important to prove to themselves and to prove to others that they're not that burden, that they're not that incapable person, that they're not helpless, useless, or all the other things they keep hearing. Internalized ableism doesn't just have impact on work. It's the reason why some disabled people believe that they will never find a partner or have close relationships or can't travel, can't join sports clubs, can't enjoy the arts or do anything else that they'd like to do, because they're not just being told constantly, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, but at some point this external voice becomes their internal voice. can talk from personal experience here. Because I still have internalized ableism, much less, or I'm much more aware of it. And I actively fight against it. And in many situations, I'm also now able to turn it off, tune it out. It's no longer there. But this wasn't a process that took me a couple of months. This took me years and years of work, setbacks, and so forth. If you look at this video where I talk about 2 of my worst recruitment experiences as a graduate trying to find a job, again, you can still hear the internalized ableism that I experienced back then. How is my internalized ableism? What did that look like? How did that shape my life? I can't go into all the different stories because then we would be here for the next 3 days and you don't have the time and I didn't have the time to do that. But it was lots of different things. I honestly believed when I was sort of 11, 12, 13 years old, not long after my diagnosis, that I would never have a relationship. I believed that I wouldn't be able to find a husband, a partner, someone to spend my life with me, that I would be on my own. And it was a huge fear. The interesting thing here is, and that again shows how traumatic being diagnosed with a disability and all the discrimination and stigma that hits you right after is, I can't even remember many of the conversations that my mom tells me we had, that I was sitting on the sofa crying that I would never find a boyfriend or a husband. I can't remember these conversations, but she said we had many of them. I can't recall them. So I know my brain is protecting me from some of those really tough memories post-diagnosis. So I'm sharing something that happened to me, even though I can't really remember it. Instances of internalized ableism that I do recall are the times when I tried really hard to not seem visually impaired. Don't get me wrong, I was never someone who hid their visual impairment. I said it quite out front when I met someone, not least because I wouldn't recognize them the next time. Even before I became blind, that was something I just wouldn't do. And people would consider me arrogant because I wouldn't say hi to them, ignore them the next time I met them. So I did that. And I would use a magnifying glass and things like that. But for instance, the cane really was something I was resisting. I was resisting Braille, which I really regret now because I've never learned Braille as a child or as a teenager or a young adult. And the older you are, the harder it is to learn. And I've never learned it. I also used the cane way too late. I only started using a cane when I had multiple near misses and quite significant near misses. And some not so many near misses with cars, falling down countless stairs. To this day, I have extremely wonky ankles because I've sprained and overstretched my ankles so many times that they now just wobble. So I always have to wear high top shoes. And all of that happened because I did not want the cane. I wanted to have instances in my life where I could just pretend to be non-disabled, where I could pretend to be sighted. That was all that it was. People who knew me knew I was visually impaired. But I enjoyed the fact that I could go in a shop, I could walk down the street, I could be in a bus, and no one was any the wiser in terms of my condition. And I knew, of course, that would change the moment I have a cane because that's an outward signal, disabled. The same happened with other things. And even when I got my cane, I wasn't using it. I was carrying it around in my backpack until I had another few falls, bumps, and so forth. And my husband said to me, I'm not an expert, but I don't believe that's how a cane works, and this is not how it's going to do anything. And my parents sort of said the same thing. And that's also when I started looking into guide dogs, because I just really hated the cane. And I frankly hate it till to this day. I prefer a guide dog, but that's a different story. The area, however, where I faced most of my internalized ableism has to do with performance. Till this day, much less so than in the past, but till this day, there's a part of me that believes I have to outperform everyone in order to have a chance. And unfortunately, that's not just a belief. It's also partly the reality. Everyone who's part of an underrepresented or marginalized group knows that there's truth to it. You just have to be better. You have to work harder to get the same opportunities as those are more in mainstream represented groups. However, I also know that I pushed it to the extreme. I recognized very early that education would be one of the areas that would help me. Speaking a different language would help. So I flew to New Zealand at the age of 16 on my own without my parents. I lived there for a year and a half, finished high school. I took classes there in 6th and 7th form, A-levels, last 2 years of high school, for those who don't know the British terminology, that I had never taken before. Everyone else had these classes, such as economics, for the last 4 or 5 years. So I had some major catching up to do. I also jumped 2 years. I went from year 10 into year 12. So there was lots that I had to do, but I felt it was necessary that I had to do this. I also took classes at university because they were more difficult and because I thought this is going to prove that I can do something. I was never really interested in counting and auditing, and I only took that minor because it was seen as a harder one. And I thought if I again take it and prove that I have really good grades in it, I would be taken more seriously. I did an internship or placement every single university holiday I had. I took every extra module, extracurricular class my undergrad university would offer. When I did my postgrad, I did an RA, research assistant job on the side, because again, I wanted to just get as much experience in the bag, build up my CV as much as I could, and always try to be one of the best, if not the best. All of that just in the hopes of getting something that other people probably get with much less. That also meant while I was doing my PhD, which was a 6-year process, I worked full-time in a job for which I was, for 4 of the years, only paid part-time. And full-time here, I mean about 50, 60 hours, and I had my PhD on top. So there were 6 years of my life where I spent probably somewhere around 90 to 100 hours working almost every single week. I took holidays, not least because my husband, what's the word? Insisted, that's the word, insisted on it, which was utterly necessary. But other than that, it was really at some point getting up, going to work, eating breakfast at work, eating lunch at work, eating dinner at work, and then going home, and then really just going to bed, and then getting up, shower, toothbrush, all of that, off to work. And I did that 5 days a week. And then I would also work from home on the weekends. And again, I did all of that because I felt that I had to perform. I was so happy that I had a job, but also so afraid I would lose it if I in any shape or form showed that I might just be a tiny bit less good at something than anyone else. So, and just to give you an idea, I didn't just work from morning till night. Sometimes I worked through the night. I didn't do this like that often, but still a few times a year at least, where I would get up in the morning and the next time I would go to bed would be the next evening, and I would work about 36 hours straight. Often I would do that in the winter with the windows open so that I would be less likely to fall asleep. And I would call these my night shifts. Still didn't mean that I wouldn't go to work the next day. I just worked, took a shower, ate breakfast, and then went into the office. That's the only thing I did. That only thing that changed was me going from working in my flat to working at work. I then passed my PhD, summa cum laude, high distinction, highest grade that you can get. And I still wasn't sure if I was going to have a future. And then I applied for jobs, got the one that brought me to the UK. And there's something happened, or in that process of accepting the job and then moving to the UK, where I'm to this day very grateful to my husband, because he was fully on board with following my career around. He was perfectly happy with saying, okay, you got a job in the UK, let's move to the UK. That wasn't the issue, but he said, I have a condition. And that condition is that you cut down your work. No more working on weekends, and the evenings are free as well. You need to get this in check. You need to stop working nonstop. This is not healthy. And he was right. I don't remember how many aspirin I took over the years, because I would constantly have severe headaches. I would have stomach issues from the lack of sleep and all kinds of things. I was not doing well because I was just working. I was going for a walk, and I would walk, of course, to work and back, and I had a personal trainer session once a week, but most of the rest of the time was just work. And no matter what I achieved, I always felt it wasn't enough, that it had to be more and more and more. Even when I saw that others hadn't achieved the same, it still didn't make me feel safe enough to let go a bit, because I felt, well, someone is gonna use my eyesight as a problem. And remember, if you watched other videos of me, 3 years into my PhD, I went from visually impaired to blind. So I had that to deal with. And then just a sense of what people are going to see me as even less worthy and valuable now just increased. And just to be clear, it wasn't that, someone at work or anywhere had anything to do with that. But I just kept going. And that despite the fact that during the 6 months that my sight went down, I had daily nausea from morning to night. I was constantly dizzy. I call them my wobblies, where I just suddenly feel like the world is tilting or the world is spinning. So I feel really wobbly. I fell down a bunch of times because I was on stairs while those dizzy spells just suddenly hit. It's just my brain trying to adjust. But despite all that, I kept working and working. I didn't feel like it was okay for me to say, I'm going through something here. I need to, reduce my hours. I need to work less, or at least only work as much as I was paid for. And similarly, it took me a lot of time before I was willing to take on something like a support worker, which again is more of an external sign that there are things you can't do. Because that's really something I wasn't willing to admit to, that there are things I can't do. Even if I forced myself through it, if this doing something like trying to analyze a huge Excel file caused me major headaches and I had to take strong painkillers to deal with the migraine-like headaches, or would cause me a migraine and then I would struggle with a migraine, being stuck, not being able to do anything for a couple of days, I would do it rather than admitting that it would be much better if someone else would do that. Rather than asking a colleague to do that and then taking some of their job on that I'm much better at and I'm faster at. Again, as I said in the beginning, this is internalized ableism, because I felt I need to be able to do it all. Because otherwise, all the stuff I kept hearing must be true. I didn't appreciate the fact, and I wouldn't listen if someone said it, that of course everyone has stuff they can't do, or can't do as well as others. I mean, that's why some people are artists and some people are mathematicians. It's because we're all good at different stuff. But I felt I had to be awesome at everything, because otherwise people would spot that disabled woman who is sort of an imposter and shouldn't be here. Since then, things have changed drastically. I have learned to set boundaries. I work fewer hours, but actually get a lot more done. I am happily working with a support worker, and in the future you'll get to meet a couple of my former support workers and my current support worker as well, and hear what their job is like and what it is. But I've also learned to just say things like, I can't do this because it will take me 2 days, like 20 hours of work, and it takes you, sighted person, 45 minutes. So I don't see the point in spending 2 days doing this, potentially getting myself into a situation where I get a migraine. Well, you could have done this in 45 minutes. Let me do something that might take you hours, but I'm much faster. For instance, I read really fast because my screen reader reads at more than 3 times the speed of human speech. I can type really fast. I can touch type, and I can type really, really fast. Memorizing things. I'm really good, like most blind people, at memorizing things. So there are lots of stuff I'm actually faster than sighted people, or at least the average sighted person. And I've learned that, and I now set boundaries, or I do raise the hand in a meeting if someone says, well, you can all see the slides and the data, so I don't need to read it out. I put my hand up and say, yes, you do, because I can't see that. And in order for me to make a decision, to join in the discussion, to make any kind of useful comment, I need to be able to know what it is, so you need to tell me. In the past, what I would do, I would get a heartbeat like crazy, go up to like 160, 100 beats a minute. I would start, sweating, all the anxiety traits that I wouldn't say a word, and then afterwards again feel like an imposter, because I would believe, well, they're right, I had nothing to contribute in that meeting. But at the same time not admitting to myself that I had nothing to contribute, because I couldn't see what we were talking about. And that if everyone else wouldn't have been able to see the data, the tables, the figures, whatever it was, they couldn't have contributed either, because nobody can analyze data and argue what it means for strategy or whatever without knowing the data. But again, I wouldn't see that. And it is really something I just hear again and again when I talk to other disabled people, and I see it again and again in the data. And this had huge impacts on the disability community. But where does it come from? Because I want to make it very clear, internalized ableism is not the fault of disabled people. The fault lies with society, because we hear these stigmatizing comments, those prejudice, misconceptions, beliefs about us again and again and again. And if you hear something long enough, you start believing it. So it is not the individual's fault that they start believing these bad things about themselves. It is the fault of those who keep sending out these messages, directly, indirectly. Doesn't matter. The fact that when I tell people I'm blind and that I have a PhD, that many people assume that I got my PhD, got my job as an academic, and then lost my sight, is frankly insulting, because what they're assuming is that I could have never managed a PhD while blind, that I would have never gotten an academic job while blind, but that rather my employer just kept me on when I lost my sight while I was already in employment, almost like a pity party. And again, it's a smaller number of people, but the number is bigger than many of you would think. And if you're then still in a vulnerable place, still coming to terms with the change to your life, because remember, getting a disability or having a worsening of your underlying conditions is traumatizing every single time. And it takes a lot of adjustments. We have to learn a lot of new skills and deal with a lot of changes in our lives. And then having people doubt your ability, in my case, just because my eyes don't work the way they're supposed to, just because someone can't hear, just because someone might have an energy limiting condition, just because someone is quadriplegic, just because someone is neurodivergent, and the way they perceive the world is different. Is that fair? No, it's not. Is that helping? No, it's not. But getting this feedback again and again is what leads to internalized ableism. Let me finish with one final story. This was at the beginning of October, so about 2 months ago. I was in London at our London campus near the British Museum. I gave a talk to all of our bosses within the university. All went well. One of my PhD students was there and one of my former PhD students was there as well. We all went outside because my current PhD student, Walker, had agreed to kindly walk back with me to this train station so that I didn't have to navigate busy London just with my cane Harry and my own, but had a sighted person next to me. When we were outside just chatting, because Emilio, my former PhD student, wanted to go back in the building and just do some work from there, there was someone that Walker knew from his volunteer work at the soup kitchen. So this person came up to us. He introduced, like my PhD student introduced all of us. And when he came to me, I mean, yeah, there were only 2 other people, but when he came to me, he said, "This is my PhD supervisor." And I was standing outside with Harry, my cane, completely unfolded in my hand because, we were just walking out of the building and we could planning to continue to walk. So there was no point in me folding Harry. But back to the story. So we were out there, my PhD student saying, "This is my PhD supervisor." And then I could feel the other person being utterly taken aback. And I then checked in with the sighted people in this situation that I knew afterwards. It's like, I felt like this person was taken aback. And they're like, yeah, they were. And I don't know why. Whether that was because of the age he believes I am, if it was the fact that I'm blind, if it's a combination, I don't know. But again, if you get these reactions, it sometimes is really difficult to then not start believing, well, maybe I don't deserve to be here. Maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe I'm just not the right person for this job. Let me finish with this for you. Be very mindful when you talk to a disabled person, what you ask them, what you praise them for. Because even when you praise us for simple things like going to a coffee shop, cooking a meal, or doing our laundry, you might think it is amazing that people can do that, even though they might not have any limbs, or they might not be able to see, or other issues. You might think it's amazing, but that person probably doesn't see it in any shape or form as amazing, and what they see is amazing about them, you don't even know. But you already take it away from them because you tell them that basically the cool thing about them is that they can do laundry and go to a coffee shop, and not that they might be an amazing artist, an advocate, a lawyer, a barista, or who knows what their job is. Be mindful of that. Be respectful. And if you know a disabled person and you feel that they might benefit from support, again, don't push it on them, because you should never assume that you know what a disabled person needs or doesn't need. We have enough people who are trying to do that. We don't need more of you. But still, be supportive, be an ally. Ask if there's something you can do. If you have an employee, ask if there's maybe a rearrangement of the work amongst the team that might benefit them. But again, no pushing, no assuming, asking, and only in situation when it's appropriate. Well, that was a lot. I know I was quite rambly. I have no idea what my support worker who's editing this is going to make out of it. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy this. If you're in the UK, please remember we're bang in the middle of Disability History Month. So this is a month where we celebrate all the achievements of the disability community, but we also point to all the challenges that are still there for us as a community. So play your part, but also remember, we're also here the rest of the year, not just during these 4 weeks. Thank you. Click like, subscribe, and all of those things. Bye.